Dante Moore could have left. That is what makes this story different. He was already a former five-star quarterback. He had already survived the pressure of starting too early at UCLA. He had already transferred to Oregon, sat, learned, reset, and then exploded into one of the most efficient passers in college football. By the end of 2025, Moore had the numbers: 3,565 passing yards, 30 touchdown passes, a completion percentage over 71%, a playoff run, a national spotlight, and enough draft buzz that he could have entered the 2026 National Football League draft conversation as one of the most interesting quarterbacks in the class. But he did not go. He came back. And now the question is no longer whether Dante Moore is talented. That part has been known for years. The question is whether returning to Oregon can turn him into quarterback, one of the 2027 National Football League draft. That is the line he is chasing. Not just first-round quarterback, not just Oregon star, not just former five-star who figured it out. Quarterback one. The player teams compare everyone else against. The passer who separates from Arch Manning, C.J. Carr, LaNorris Sellers, and the rest of a loaded 2027 quarterback group. And that is why this season matters so much. Because Moore did not come back to prove he can play college football. He came back to finish the argument. Before Oregon, before UCLA, before the playoff disappointment, Dante Moore was one of the biggest quarterback recruits in America. At Martin Luther King Jr. Senior High School in Detroit, he built the kind of resume that follows a player before he even reaches campus. Nearly 10,000 passing yards, 135 touchdown passes, 2 state championships, national honors, All-American recognition, 5-star status. He was accurate, polished, calm, and advanced, the kind of high school quarterback who looked like he had been built in a quarterback lab. Moore was not sold as a raw athlete learning the position. He was sold as a passer, a pure quarterback with arm talent, touch, deep ball ability, and the kind of calm that makes coaches believe the game is already slower for him than it should be. At one point, Oregon was supposed to be the destination. Then the story changed. Moore flipped to UCLA, and that decision sent him into one of the hardest roles in college football, true freshman starting quarterback. There is a difference between being talented and being ready. Moore had the talent, but UCLA made him grow before he was fully protected. In 2023, he played in 9 games and started 5. He threw for 1,610 yards, 11 touchdown passes, and 9 interceptions. The flashes were there. In his start against San Diego State, he threw for 290 yards and 3 touchdown passes. You could see the arm. You could see the timing. You could see why he had been rated so highly. But you could also see the pressure, the sacks, the turnovers, the difficult situations, the freshman mistakes that happen when a young quarterback gets thrown into real games before the structure around him is ready to carry him. That UCLA season did not break Dante Moore, but it changed the shape of his story. The 5-star label was no longer the whole conversation. Now there was adversity attached to it. He entered the transfer portal on November 30th, 2023, and then he went back to the place that had once been part of his original path. Oregon. When Moore committed to Oregon, it felt like a reset, not a quick fix. A reset. That distinction matters, because in 2024, he did not immediately take over. He sat behind Dylan Gabriel. He played in limited action. He watched. He learned. He got a year inside Dan Lanning's program and Will Stein's offense without the pressure of having to save everything right away. For a quarterback who had started too early, that year may have been exactly what he needed. Sometimes development is not about adding more hype. Sometimes development is about finally slowing the game down. Then 2025 arrived, and Dante Moore looked like a different quarterback. He started all 15 games for Oregon. He completed 296 of 412 passes. That is 71.8%. He threw for 3,565 yards, 30 touchdown passes, and 10 interceptions. He averaged 8.7 yards per attempt and finished with a 163.7 passer rating. Those are not just good numbers. Those are the numbers of a quarterback who found rhythm, structure, and belief. The biggest proof came in moments where the game demanded more than comfort. At Penn State, in one of the hardest environments in college football, Moore threw 3 touchdown passes and no interceptions in a double overtime win. He delivered in pressure moments, including crucial overtime throws, and showed the kind of poise that scouts want to see from a quarterback trying to become a franchise-level prospect. Against Minnesota, he completed 27 of 30 passes for 306 yards and 2 touchdown passes, 90% completion, an Oregon single-game record. That is the precision part of his profile. Then in the playoff against James Madison, he threw for a career-high 313 yards and 4 touchdown passes. Oregon scored again and again, and Moore looked like a quarterback capable of making the postseason stage feel normal. That is why the draft buzz came. The arm was always there, the pedigree was always there, but now the production had finally caught up. Still, the story did not end cleanly. Oregon reached the college football playoff semifinal and ran into Indiana, and that game became the reason this video exists. The final score was ugly. Oregon lost 56-22. Moore threw for 285 yards and 2 touchdown passes, but he also had an interception and other turnover issues in the biggest game of the season. For a quarterback trying to become quarterback 1, that matters, not because one game erases a season, it does not, but because the highest levels of quarterback evaluation always come back to the hardest moments. What happens when the protection breaks down? What happens when the defense has answers? What happens when the season is on the line and the easy rhythm disappears? Moore took public responsibility for that loss. Then, 5 days later, he made the decision that changed the entire 2027 quarterback race. On January 14th, 2026, he announced he was returning to Oregon. Real quick, if you're loving this deep dive, hit the like button and subscribe so you never miss another player journey. That decision was bigger than one more season of college football. It was a bet on Oregon, a bet on his teammates, a bet on development, a bet that one more year could turn high-end draft buzz into quarterback 1 certainty. And it raised the pressure immediately, because when a player walks away from early draft momentum, the next season is not treated like a normal return. It becomes a confirmation year. Dante Moore has to prove that 2025 was not the peak. He has to prove it was the beginning of the finished version. That is what separates him from the rest of the 2027 quarterback race. Arch Manning has the name, the talent, and the Texas spotlight. C.J. Carr has the efficiency, Notre Dame pressure, and a redemption tour stage. LaNorris Sellers has the physical tools and dual threat upside. Other quarterbacks will rise because that always happens. But Moore has something very valuable. He has already lived multiple quarterback lives. He was the 5-star. He was the freshman who struggled. He was the transfer. He was the backup who waited. He was the breakout starter. He was the playoff quarterback who had to wear the disappointment. And now he is the returning star trying to turn all of that into the strongest argument in the class. His scouting profile starts with accuracy. When Moore is in rhythm, the ball placement looks clean. He can layer throws. He can attack short and intermediate windows. He can throw with touchdown field. He has enough arm strength to stretch the field and enough polish to make the offense feel controlled. He is not a pure runner. He is functional. He can move. He can scramble when needed. The spring game even showed more willingness to use his legs. But his National Football League case is not built around being a dynamic rushing threat. It is built around passing, processing, timing, accuracy, poise, and the ability to operate an offense at a high level. That is why the pressure question is so important. Moore does not need to become a different player. He needs to become the cleanest version of the player he already is. The interceptions have to come down. The big game mistakes have to shrink. The decision-making under pressure has to become steadier. The Indiana tape cannot become the defining image of his evaluation, because quarterback 1 is not about having no flaws. Every prospect has flaws. Quarterback 1 is about making teams believe the strengths are worth building a franchise around, and the flaws are fixable. Moore has the strengths. The question is whether 2026 removes enough doubt. The Oregon situation makes the stakes even more interesting because Dylan Raiola is now in the quarterback room. Raiola is another major name, another highly touted passer, another reminder that elite programs keep collecting talent. But Moore is still the established starter. The room does not change his role. It changes the temperature around it. When a quarterback returns with quarterback one buzz, every practice report matters. Every spring comment matters. Every bad throw gets attention. Every big throw becomes a sign. That is the price of being the guy. And Moore asked for that price when he came back. That is what makes this story compelling. He could have taken the early draft path. Instead, he chose the harder story. One more season, one more playoff push, one more chance to answer the pressure questions, one more chance to become the quarterback the 2027 National Football League draft has to measure everyone else against. Dante Moore's path has not been straight. 5-star rise, UCLA adversity, Oregon reset, breakout season, playoff disappointment, return to school, quarterback one race. Now comes the final question. Can Dante Moore become quarterback one? If he turns 2026 into a complete season, the answer may define the entire 2027 National Football League draft. That's the story in Football Realm. If you love deep player journeys, hit subscribe and join the realm. Drop your thoughts below. Who do you want profiled next?